Love. I have just read in a newspaper a drama of passion. He killed her and then he killed himself. He must have loved her. It is not he or she that matters to me. It is their love alone that matters to me. It recalls to my mind a remembrance of my youth. I am very fond of shooting, yet the sight of the wounded animal or bird or the blood on its feathers and on my hands affects my heart so deeply as to make it almost stop. That year, the cold weather set in suddenly toward the end of autumn, and I was invited by one of my cousins, Carl, to go with him and shoot ducks on the marshes near his farmhouse. My cousin was a jolly fellow of 40, a typical countryman, stout, rough, bearded and dull. He lived in a large farmhouse situated in a broad valley through which a river ran. The hills right and left were covered with woods. Here the rarest of birds could be found. In the valley there were large meadows separated by hedges. Further on, by the side of the river, there was a vast marsh. It was the best shooting ground I ever saw. It was my cousin's chief care. He kept it as a preserve. Through the rushes that covered it, narrow passages had been cut. Through these passages, my cousin often went in his flat-bottomed boat to catch fish or hunt wild fowl. I arrived at my cousin's in the evening. It was freezing cold. We had dinner in the large room whose sideboards, walls and ceiling were covered with stuffed birds. Among them were hawks, owls, nightjars, buzzards, vultures and falcons. Dressed in a sealskin jacket, my cousin himself resembled some strange animal. He told me about the preparations he had made for that same night. We were to start at 3:30 in the morning so as to reach the marsh at about 4:30. On that spot, a hut had been built to shelter us somewhat from the biting wind which blows before daybreak. I threw myself onto my bed immediately after we had finished our meal and went to sleep by the side of a bright fire burning in the grate. At 3 o'clock he woke me up. I put on a sheepskin, and my cousin covered himself with a bearskin. After having each swallowed 2 cups of scalding coffee, followed by glasses of brandy, we started, accompanied by a gamekeeper and our 2 dogs. Carl and I walked side by side, our backs bent, our hands in our pockets and our guns under our arms. We were soon on the edge of the marsh and entered one of the lanes of dry rushes. Our elbows, which touched the long ribbon-like leaves, left a slight noise behind us. Suddenly, at the turn of one of the lanes, I saw the hut which had been constructed to shelter us. I went in and rolled myself up in a rug, but it was so terribly cold that I began to cough. My cousin Carl felt uneasy for me. "No matter if we don't kill much today," he said. "I don't want you to catch cold. We will light a fire." And he told the gamekeeper to cut some rushes. We made a pile in the middle of our hut. There was a hole in the middle of the roof to let out the smoke. Our hut was made of lumps of ice. When the red flames rose up, the lean ice blocks began to melt gently as if they were sweating. Carl, who had gone outside, called out to me, "Come and look here." I went out of the hut and was struck with astonishment. Our hut, in the shape of a cone, looked like a huge diamond with a heart of fire. And inside we saw 2 charming forms, those of our dogs, who were warming themselves at the fire. Suddenly a wandering cry passed near our heads, and the light from our hut showed us the wild birds. "Put out the fire," said Carl to the gamekeeper. "It is getting daylight." The sky was beginning to grow pale. Beautiful white ducks started rising from the marshes. After every few minutes, they rose in the sky in long thin lines and then disappeared in the horizon. A stream of light burst out into the night. Carl had fired, and the two dogs ran forward. And then every minute, now he, now I, fired from our guns as soon as a flying duck appeared above the rushes. And the dogs, out of breath but happy, brought the bleeding birds to us. The birds painfully fluttered their wings, and their eyes occasionally looked at us. The sun had risen, and it was a bright day with a blue sky. We were thinking of taking our departure. Just then, two birds with extended necks and outstretched wings flew rapidly over our heads. I fired, and one of them fell almost at my feet. It was a teal with a silver breast, and then in the blue space above me I heard a voice, the voice of a bird. It was a short, repeated, heart-rending lament. This bird began to turn round and round in the blue sky over our heads. It was looking at its dead companion, which I was holding in my hand. Carl was on his knees, his gun on his shoulder, watching it eagerly until it should be within. "You have killed the duck," he said, "and the drake will not fly away." And really he did not fly away. He circled over our heads repeatedly and continued his cries. Never have any cries of suffering pained my heart so much as that lament of the poor bird. Occasionally he flew away due to the danger of the gun which followed his movements. Then it would seem to me that he had decided to continue his flight alone. But as he could not bear the pain of separation, he would return to find his mate. "Leave her to the ground," Carl said to me. "He will come within shot by and by." And he did indeed come near us, by and by, careless of the danger. He came nearer and nearer, drawn by his blind love, by his deep affection for his mate whom I had just killed. Carl fired, and I saw something red come down. Then the noise of a fall among the rushes was heard. One of the dogs brought it to me. "Put these two in your game bag," Carl said to me, "and let's move now. We are already very late." Carl went into the hut to collect his things. His two dogs also went wagging after him. I knelt down, made a large hole in the ground, and buried the two dead birds in the same grave, in their own home in the cold and lonely marshes. Carl never came to know what I had done. I returned to Paris the same evening.